agree with Mike on this notion that it's Prop 13, because I really believe that if we had members of the legislature that thought more like me, who were pragmatic, who were open-minded, and who were willing to put its district first, the people first, instead of a party first, we wouldn't be in these crises today, because Governor Gray Davis would have never had trouble with his budgets. Right away when there was trouble, they come to me, they come to a couple members of the Democrat side to try to negotiate. But we have a broken system from the standpoint where you campaign to get 15 to 20% of the vote in your district, whether it be hard left, hard right, and then what do? You sail through the general. When you're in office, you're up there voting every day for that 12 or 14 or 15 or 20% of your district that isn't in touch with real California. And if we had more members who would sit at the table and not have to worry about a party boss in the next election not helping you for re-election, we'd have people who would say, you know what, let's give and take a little bit, because Democrats don't want to cut programs and Republicans don't want to raise taxes. So what do we get for the last 10 years? Borrow, 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 instead of a little bit of everything to move the state in the right direction. So I feel that unless we have a different system on how we elect our elected officials, we're going to be here. I don't care how much you redistrict party lines. You can redistrict the whole state. You're going to have the right and you're going to have the left. And on my side of the aisle, you listen to a guy with the website and you put it up and you go vote and you put people last and you put little areas first, conservative, hyper-partisan people that in my mind are hurting California.
Well, you face probably the most serious threats that I've ever seen. I mean, we actually had radio commentators talking about wanting heads on sticks of any Republican who voted for a tax hike.
That's not going to balance a budget. That's not going to keep people from getting their tax refunds, sending IOUs, stopping construction projects, because some radio folks, but I can share this with you, in the Capitol, I always hear it from members on my side, little secret, we know we can't do it with cuts only. I hear it all the time, but you know what? We're worried about some radio guys over there going to come after us in a primary. And if it was open, they'd be accountable to their district, not to two guys at a radio station.
I think Michael is on to something very fundamental. No one owns up to the simple reality that we want to have our cake and eat it. We want to have all the programs possible, and we don't want to pay for it. That may just be human nature. Mm-hmm. But as leaders, we need to reward leaders who are candid, who prioritize, and who say, here are our choices. We can have this much in transportation and this much in education, or a little more in education, a little less in transportation. But very few people talk that way. And I think they will not talk that way until the initiative that Abel Maldonado was single-handedly responsible for putting on the ballot, the nonpartisan primary, gets a chance to be voted on in 2010, because that will allow independents to vote in the primary. I happen to be the only governor ever elected with a version of that law was in effect before the U.S. Supreme Court struck it down 4 years later. And it produced what I still think is the largest primary turnout ever. So it empowers more people to vote, and you're essentially campaigning in a general election in the primary and then again in the general election. So you're talking to the entire electorate, which is the way it should be, and that's how you should govern.
Well, with all due respect, I just want to say that all of these changes in the electoral system, all designed to change the political complexion of the legislature, I think they're largely trying to address symptoms, and they're not addressing the fundamental problem. And that is that our taxing structure is completely out of whack. Our fiscal structure is completely out of whack, and as the governor said, for too many years, we've had leadership that has not told the public the truth. That has pretended that either on one side that all government programs are just a waste and that they're not worth paying for and we should pay less for them, or on the other side, we understand that the public wants all these programs, but we can get away with not paying for them. Now, year after year, we enact budgets in the state where a substantial amount of the revenues are put off to out years. We hear this again and again. Well, we're going to pay for that in the out years, or the costs are going to come due.
What does that mean?
In the out years? Well, we are in the out years now. The out years means these are the years, beyond the budget horizon, right? When the debt that we're floating to pay for this year's budget comes due. We're in the out years now, and we've put some of these expenses to the out years from here. So soon enough we're going to be in the out years squared or the out years cubed. All of this stuff should have been paid for when the budgets were enacted, and it was up to the political leadership in the state to say, we value the University of California, we value Cal State, we value the parks, we value this service or that service, just as you, the voters, do, and we are going to have to enact revenue measures today, either to pay for them today, or if they're capital expenditures, to have a reasonable system of paying for them over time. We never do that.
Mike, along those lines, if we had a reasonable system with the reasonable elected officials that were pragmatic, maybe we could have budgets that had little increases and maybe a little cuts and have stability to take the state into this area. But right now, we do nothing. We do nothing, Mike.
Terms is the moment the legislators get to Sacramento, and I'm sure you all know it because you've all been in Sacramento, your hands are immediately tied. You're constrained by the system that's in place, and that has to be changed. And nobody in Sacramento, at least as long as I've been in the state, which has been 30 years, has ever stood up and said, we need to address these fundamental issues. We need to undo the mistakes that we've made and that the public has made at the ballot box.
And we will. I want to talk about, to begin with, I want to talk about defining the problem. I mean, in other words, let's look at this budget that resulted from this predicament that we found ourselves in. You're talking about $15 billion in budget cuts, $8 billion coming out of public schools and community colleges, $787 million from state colleges and universities. The state's two huge university systems, UC and Cal State, will face massive cuts that will reduce the capacity of the 23 Cal State campuses by 10,000 students, is the estimate. $400 million reduction in funds for corrections and rehabilitation, which has always been the pet of state budgets, probably requiring the state to reduce oversight of parolees and possibly force the release of some inmates from overcrowded prisons, and then rolling back benefits for the blind and disabled by $567 million, developmentally disabled by $180 million, and $460 million taken out of public transit. I mean, this looks to me like an absolute disaster. There is absolutely nothing to be happy about in this. Is this California?
Well, we're living in California, and that's the budget. As I tell people, when you go over the cliff, there are no good options. The last scene in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid are the two heroes jumping over the cliff, and it ends there because nothing good happens when you jump over a cliff. So you have to raise taxes that no one wants to pay. Wait till people see the doubling of their car tax and the increase in the income tax and the increase in the sales tax. And no one likes to see the great University of California, the Cal State system, our public school systems doing with fewer resources. Everyone acknowledges that our system of higher education does a phenomenal job, and it's being penalized in this budget. So nothing good happens when you get over the cliff. The debate really should be, how can you prevent the state from getting to the edge of the cliff, much less over.
And that's something we're going to talk about, but I also think it's important to define the dimensions of this problem that we're in right now, because I think, only when you recognize the true dimension of this do you realize how critical it is that we have to find solutions to fix this. You've written about the tax burden and how that's being spread unfairly, and that comes out in this budget as well.
Right. I would suggest that we need to redo the math on taxes in the state. Jim Brolte has talked eloquently and fairly enough about the fact that the top 1% of income taxpayers shoulder an enormous amount of the income tax burden. But I think what you have to consider is the tax that's imposed on the rest of the community. When you cut back on Cal State and the community colleges, and you see when you raise tuition, when you deny access, that's a tax on the middle class and the working class. When you cut back on services at the at ground level, that's a tax on the middle class and the working class, and it's a substantial tax. When you cut back on health services, that's a tax on the working class. These are all taxes that top 1% can avoid because they are not users of these services, but they are beneficiaries of these services. I mean, we talk to businessmen all the time who say it's great to have University of California graduates who I can employ.